106.5 FM and online. It's the After 5 guest with Wyn Thomas.
And time for my After 5 guest today, and I say I'm delighted that Lisa Tippin is here. Her book is called Secret Swansea. Thanks for coming along with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Let's ask you, what made you write the book? Why did you sort of go through that?
Well, I'm fascinated by social history in particular.
Yeah.
And I always love wandering through any town or city, but obviously, because I live in Swansea, it has particular resonance for me. And wondering about who's lived in this building, whose feet have walked here before me, whose hands have touched these walls. And I think one of the things that I really am interested in is what has really gone on behind this facade, this front door, and is there anything that we don't really know? And I was talking to a friend, and she was telling me how angry she had been that in the film about the life of Mary Shelley, Fanny Imlay wasn't mentioned. And so few people know that she had a stepsister, Fanny Imlay, who actually committed suicide in the Mackworth Arms. Right. In Swansea, and she's almost been written out of literary history. And to think that she was such an important person in this literary family, and it always makes me think, what else has gone on in Swansea that we know very little about or that we don't know about? And so that's what I'd really like to do, sort of scratch the surface and see what's lurking underneath.
So let's pick out some details from the book, okay? It really is quite a packed book, so we'll do a couple of bits and pieces from there, if you don't mind, okay? Smugglers of Port Einan.
Yes.
Who were kind of hand in glove with the excise men, weren't they?
Yes, and I thought that was quite fascinating, but really they had, there was very little choice in those days because smuggling was something that really you had to do because there was very little means of having any money. Poverty was so rife, and the people who ran the area really were in charge of the excise men, and they needed them to help with the smuggling because they were allowing it to happen. One of the sons of the families that were in charge, he was helping the smugglers basically because even though he was very rich, he could see the strife that those families were in. Yeah. So he was willing to turn a blind eye, and that meant the other people turning a blind eye as well. So he was sort of making sure that those people in charge were also turning a blind eye and letting it happen, basically. So it's quite fascinating to think that the church in Port Einan was a place where they used to hide their smuggled goods, actually beneath the altar.
Now, I saw at a press release about the book, and something that was mentioned in the press release was the little-known Victorian Asylum. Where was that?
That was in one of the streets. Oh, I really can't think of the name of it.
Right. But it was one.
Yes, there was one. And
I know it's not in the book, but it was mentioned, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. And basically what I became fascinated with were the number of people who ended up in the asylum who shouldn't have been there in the first place, because there were several people who ended up in these asylums basically because of things that we take for granted today that aren't even proper illnesses. So perhaps they were women who had some problems when they reached a certain age in life, or actually women who just wanted a little bit of freedom. Their husbands couldn't understand why they would want that, or they were too embarrassed by them. So actually they ended up putting them in the asylum. Or there were people who had fits or fainting fits, and some people interpreted that as they were marked, that they had something religiously wrong with them, so they ended up just putting them in an asylum because they were embarrassed by them.
Right, okay. Well, we can't sort of mention Swansea without mentioning Wyn Thomas, and he has his place in the book, doesn't he? He's included, yeah. He's an important part of Swansea. But somebody else is also mentioned in the book as well as a poet I didn't know is Harry Webb. He's little unknown, isn't he, really?
Yes, he is. And one of the reasons why I love Harry Webb so much is because he links two places that are both really important to me, and that's Swansea, where I live now, and where I spent some happy summers when I was a girl, and the South Wales Valleys, where I originally came from and where I was born. And he too was born in Swansea, and he was born into a very working class family, and that's where my roots are from. But he spent a lot of time working in the valleys. And what he did there was, as a librarian, really open up the world of what libraries could do for people. And he took a really special interest, actually, in libraries and women, because as you probably know, libraries initially were used very much by working class men. Miners, they would go into the reading rooms, they would have their pipes, they would have their newspapers, and, they were used so much so by men that women felt a little bit excluded. And what Harry Webb started to do was to think, we can open up this world to women. And so when he was working in libraries such as Mountain Ash, he caused quite a bit of controversy by trying to use these rooms as places that would encourage women to further their education. So he brought in journals, magazines, and novels that would appeal to women. And lots of people didn't like it, but he was really trying to open up the world for working class women. And that is a part of history that I'm really passionate about finding out about. And usually it's women who are doing that. But here was Harry Webb, who lived with Mike Stevens in a commune in part of Merthyr, actually going out and doing his bit for womankind. So I think that's why he's got a special place in my heart, because he sort of links two places I love, and he did so much for women.
And also, you loved him so much, you actually included a poem in the book, didn't you, about him?
Yes, because he talks about this sort of ubiquitous Welsh mam that we all think of as this sort of formidable woman who can do so much for her family. And she also obviously scared Napoleon, which I thought was quite humorous.
Do you mind reading the poem for us?
So it's called Women of Fishguard. The Emperor Napoleon, he sent his ships of war with spreading sails to conquer Wales and land on Fishguard shore. But Jemima, she was waiting, with her broomstick in her hand, and all the other women too, to guard their native land. For the Russians and the Prussians, he did not give a damn, but he took on more than he bargained for when he tried it on with Mam. So I think that's just hilarious.
It is, yeah. It made me chuckle as well when I first read it. Yeah, it's brilliant, yeah. Wine Street holds an important part in Swansea, it's a very historical place. I mean,
yes,
now it's a place for nighttime activities, but it's very old and used for many sort of different types of properties, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, because originally it started out with, it had a market there, and it started out as a sort of trading place. Certainly in medieval times, it was where they held one of their early markets and fairs, and it sort of makes you conjure up this image in your mind of a typical medieval market. Sort of wool being sold, material, leather, sort of animals roaming, lots of mess on the floor, lots of sort of cacophony of smells around. And then later on, it became a little bit more salubrious, but it was all a place where you always had a mixture of different sort of people. So you'd have a surgeon living there. You'd also have a candlestick maker. There was a clock maker and repairer. And then you had a sort of inns started coming in until they eventually took over, and it became much more like the Wine Street we know today.
But you had lots of banks there as well, didn't you?
And there were also lots of banks. Yeah, that was another thing it was famous for, yes. So it really was a hodgepodge of all these different places.
And I don't know if you know, but your research is that it was one of the first places to have a Jewish synagogue in Wyn Street.
Oh gosh, right. Yeah. So that's interesting, yes.
Down where the casino once was.
Right, okay.
Yeah, they're really there. Where, if you go back years ago, there was a shop called the Green Stamp Shop.
Right, yes, okay.
That building, before they built a new building, there was a building there. It was actually the first ever Jewish synagogue in Swansea.
Right, and that's fascinating, yes.
That's only come from somebody I've interviewed in the past, yeah, indeed, yeah. And Salubrious Passage, I mean, there's a mystery. You said Salubrious, but that passage is sort of the old part of Wyn Street still left, isn't it, really?
Yes, it is, yeah, and it has the sort of original light as well, which is quite interesting. It looks really old, and it sort of stands out as sort of, you have all these sort of wine bars around it, although there's still a sort of real feeling there that you're in somewhere old. Wherever you walk down Wyn Street, I think, very much it always conjures up a place to me, even
and
it has those bars.
A place with Dylan Thomas, going back to Dylan Thomas, he spent a lot of time there, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, yes.
The original Cadoma was there, wasn't it?
It was, yes. So there's always a feeling there, I think. You can never get rid of the ghosts of the past when you're walking down Wyn Street. I always feel I'm in a sort of another place, and certainly the Salubrious Passage very much gives that feeling, because it's narrow and it widens out, but very much you feel as if you're in another time when you walk through it.
Another thing you cover in the book, towards the end of the book, is the great industrial area. But it wasn't a nice place to live, was it, Swansea? It was full of disease and goodness knows what, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, it was full of disease. The houses were very cramped. You know, they were your typical 2 up, 2 down. And so many people came to the area looking for work. They arrived before houses were ready for them. Swansea wasn't ready for the great influx that came from the valleys, that came from England, looking for work in Copperopolis and the lead works, and eventually the pottery, all the places that sprung up along the Towie, that there wasn't places for them. So you ended up with so many people crammed into these 2 up, 2 downs. And even the families that originally lived there, they would end up needing more money. They would take in a lodger. So you'd have the whole family in one room with a lodger sleeping in the spare bedroom. So you'd have, you know, top to tail of children in cots, parents in one double bed. And then, of course, the facilities, the sanitation simply wasn't there. You know, so you can imagine what was running through the streets that added to the problems, the cholera outbreak.
But it's known for the copper side, but the pottery side is pretty well known as well, isn't it, worldwide?
That's right, yes. I mean, some of the pottery now, it was still on bargain hunt the other day. People still collect it, you know, so it's fascinating to think that this city produced pottery that's still being collected by people today, and it's really colourful. It's quite beautiful, actually, you know, and to think that such colourful things came from a time that was sort of steeped in grey and black and coal dust.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming to see me today. It's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you. The book is Secret Swansea by Lisa Tibbin. It's from Amberley Publishers. It's available from most bookshops?
Bookshops. It's in cover to cover at the moment in Mumbles, yes, and it's online in Amazon and Amberley.
Lovely.
Yes.
There you go. Okay. Thanks so much for being my After 5 guest today, and good luck with the book.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.